I don't know about you, but I find myself in the habit of often having built a comms plan, and I know the next job is to execute the plan, right? But I don't. I don't. Tuck the plan away. In the olden days, I'd put it up on a shelf. These days, I put it on a cloud shelf. And then, like 2 years later, a year later, however much, I pull it down from the shelf. Oh, there's my plan. I blow the dust off of it. We should really refresh this thing. What were we supposed to be doing here? I do this all the time. Why do I do that?
I mean, it's a common problem, right? I mean, I see this happen a lot, and that's part of the reason why I always feel like if you don't know how to execute the plan, it's really only as good as the paper it's printed on, right?
So I guess step one is really an honest assessment of what's working and what's not when it comes to refreshing a plan. Walk me through some of
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when it comes to figuring out, what you are doing or why, it's really about why you want to do the thing that you want to do, right? So if you don't have a reason, because I think a lot of times in my position anyway, as a consultant, the client might come and maybe they're getting directives from the C-suite that say, go out and do this thing. And so they come to me and they say, okay, we need to do this thing. And you're like, but why are we doing it? So you have to be able to answer the question, why? Why are we doing it? What do we want to accomplish with this? And then once you understand that, of course, you have to know like where, if you're going to measure results, where are you now? You have to benchmark, where things stand right now to understand if you're making progress or not, because otherwise, I think a lot of people are just kind of chasing their tail. They don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, and they don't know if they're actually making any headway doing the thing that they're doing.
Yeah, and so often we do what feels right. I have a hunch. I got feedback from my neighbor about, which is cool. I'm not discounting. That's organic, right? But what are some of the key metrics we should be using? And if I can, to move you beyond media mentions and backlinks, and for heaven's sake, impressions, and on YouTube, views. I love all of them.
Right.
They're an entryway, but my
Right.
goodness, they're not the metrics we should be hanging our hat on.
Right. Well, I think with PR, it is hard when somebody asks you for metrics. It can be difficult, right? Because PR is laddering up to a bigger overall marketing picture usually. And so I feel like that's part of that conversation. And again, I just feel like we just need to have some more conversations around what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we want to measure first. And then the other things kind of fall into place a little bit better. But I think a lot of times those conversations are not had. And it's kind of like PR is an order taker. We run off and do, the bidding of the client, or, maybe it's an internal, boss or manager, whatever. And so we're not really figuring out what it is we're trying to measure. Now, I would say one thing that I would not measure, and I've seen this with agencies before, is the number of pitches that are being sent out. For example, if you're doing media relations in a PR program, because you could send out 1,000 pitches, but if they're bad pitches, they're crappy, you're not going to get any coverage. And so, it doesn't matter. You could send out pitches all day long. If they're not targeted, effective, you don't follow up, whatever. There have to be some other metrics in place, I would say, to understand, are you making headway and are you building momentum? Because in a good PR, an ongoing PR program, you should be being invited to contribute to articles. Maybe your executives are being invited to speak at events, things like that.
So what are some of the common mistakes that you see companies making at times when they're evaluating past performance of PR and even marketing efforts?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like they are not looking at the right things, right? So maybe they said, well, we put out a press release and nothing happened. Well, did anybody pitch the press release to a list of targeted media outlets or journalists to try to get some coverage for that? They try it once, didn't work. They say PR doesn't work. Maybe we aren't going to do that. And sometimes I think it's a very kind of a one-off type of, initiative PR can be. It's like, well, we have this new thing to announce, so we're going to engage in some PR now. But then they go away for 6 months or a year till they have something else new. And that's not usually very effective at as far as getting in front of the media and getting the attention that you want.
Okay. If step one is sort of evaluating, actually, let me ask you before we move to step two, is the SWOT analysis still a thing? Because I've really never moved entirely away from it in one way, shape, or form.
I mean, I think it's not. I remember working before I went out on my own, I worked at an agency and we used to do the SWOT analysis. And I don't really see that as much now,
Okay.
but I do work usually with some smaller companies. And when I say small, I mean 500 employees or, that definition of small business. But I think with an enterprise client, you might be engaging more in that type of
Got it.
activity.
Okay. Step two would be filling in the gaps. Identify the gaps, fill in the gaps, and build a PR strategy that you can keep up with, something sustainable. Why is consistency still one of the most effective ways to go about this rather than one-off campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about how sometimes companies will say, well, we have a new product or service to announce, so we need to do a PR launch, a campaign. And they'll, hire someone, do that, and then they won't do anything again
They
for,
disappear.
because, yeah, they probably don't have a new product or service to announce every couple months. They might have one once or twice a year. And I definitely have seen that in my own, practice where companies will come and they'll just want that. And I've really moved away from working like that because I don't think it's very effective. You might get some coverage, hopefully you do, but it's not the same as engaging in an ongoing, consistent PR effort. And to me, that means that you are not only looking at, okay, we have a new product or service, you're looking at thought leadership, contributed articles, you're looking at customer stories. You're factoring in other things that you probably are already working on within the company. Maybe different departments working on it. That's another thing. The silos get built up sometimes. So it's good for, the PR team, the content folks, the social media team to all stay in touch with each other. And that makes it a much easier, hill to climb as far as keeping things kind of out there constantly and consistently in front of your audiences.
Okay, one of the ways to do that is personal branding. And that could be as simple as recording your CEO in a presentation or even an address to staff. Kendall Brightman and I just talked about this last episode. Where are you at with this, the wave of personal branding? Do you see it eclipsing organizational branding, or is it just another layer that's becoming an important part of marketing in that case, but complementing PR?
That's a really interesting question because I feel like with maybe younger executives, I've seen
And audiences.
yeah, I've seen that more commonly. I don't feel like my clients in the manufacturing space, for example, that have been around for 50 or 75 years,
Right,
their executives are not really interested in personal branding per se.
right.
I don't think it ever hurts. Obviously, it helps the individual, but it can really help the company. And I just love it when CEOs and C-suite execs are behind the PR program and are not, stingy with their time as far as, if you need to interview them and ghostwrite for them for LinkedIn, for example, or something like that. That really helps a lot. And getting them out there in the spotlight really helps not only them, but the company and the PR effort. So I'm really a big fan of that.
Here's something I'm fighting with for my own company. Of Traditionally, I've wanted to be searchable on Google, and I still do. Love Google, owner of YouTube. But more and more people are turning to ChatGPT or Claude, or you name the generative AI software, and they're searching that way.
Uh-huh.
So how does that change the way companies should be rethinking their PR efforts? And as I dust off my PR plan, what do I do about this? How do I be searchable on AI?
Well, I have been talking to some very smart folks about this topic
Yeah,
because I'm really interested in it because for companies that have kind of maybe pushed PR to the back burner, they might want to rethink that because this advice really has always been true, but I feel like it's truer than ever now. you want to be saying yes as much as you can to every single opportunity you have to be out there. That means if you're asked to contribute to an article, if you're asked to be a guest on a podcast, if you're invited to speak at an event, you should be trying to say yes. Sure, you can't probably always say yes, but the one thought leader that I follow was saying the other day, even if a podcast has 2 listeners, which I know this one has far more than that, you should still be saying yes to that, because you know what? All that content gets ingested by the AI, the search engines, and they will then recommend you when people are searching for, the company to buy from or the expert to come to their event or whatever it might be.
Begin with yes. It begins with yes. Awesome. Okay, then third step, making PR more effective in a very rapidly changing media landscape. There's so much media fragmentation. How can
Yeah.
brands identify where their audience is actually spending their time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question too, because it really is changing, right? My hope is that the first thing out of their mouths will not be, we want to be in the Wall Street Journal, because, everybody wants to be in the Wall Street Journal. And that's
Right,
not wrong or
right.
bad. And you can certainly put them on the media list, but you should really be looking at trade publications for B2B clients. That is really where it's at. That's where the audience is spending time. You could look at industry associations that you're a member of. They all have publications. They have newsletters. Influencers in the space usually have newsletters.
Podcasts,
Um, yeah.
yeah.
Yes. All of
YouTube
those.
channels.
Yes. Yes. So you need to be kind of looking beyond, I guess, what the norm would be, and factoring all that in. And again, I don't look at any opportunity as not worthwhile. And I hope that that also changes, because I think sometimes they'll be like, well, we want to be in the Wall Street Journal. We don't care about the local business journal, or we don't care about the trade journal. They really should be caring about all of those outlets. And in fact, the AI-based search loves trade publications, because a lot of that content isn't behind paywalls. It's not gated.
That's such a good point. I know with some of the large corporations where I've been in-house and led media, we would hear all kinds of different ideas, and there'd always be a suggestion from like an engineer who had this really cool draft widget that they'd come up with, right? Or some different methodology. And I'd listen to it and I barely understand it. And there's no way I can pitch that to the local paper. They won't get
Yep.
it. It's useless. Most people won't understand it. But I would file it away as find a trade publication that deals with blue widgets, and that's their life, right? So that would be if it was like the Harvard time management box, important to you, important to me, not important to you, so on and so on.
Yeah.
This was the classic, not important to the company, not important to the media. But if you found a trade pub dealing in blue widgets, you'd pitch it. It was the niches. And in 2025, I think what I'm hearing from you is the riches are in the niches. Find them.
That's right. Your audience is splintered. We see that obviously with streaming services, and, traditional TV watching is over, but now, like you have to have 10 different streaming services in order to watch shows that you want to watch. So those folks are trying to find their audiences too. And that's, it's a challenge. So you got to figure out where most, you can reach the most, the biggest share of your audience. I don't think you can do every social media, outlet, for example, or every publication out there. So, there's still some research to be done, and tweaking along the way.
You touched on this about leaders, CEOs, but it doesn't have to be the CEO. It can be the CMO or
Right.
the CFO playing a
Sure.
more active role in PR's efforts, lending their name and their reputation. I'm a big fan of personal branding, quite frankly. I think gradually, certainly Gen Z and millennials, not so much Gen X, not boomers, but I think they identify with the who and not the what, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they
Yep.
determine their why. So,
Yeah.
and the who is the CEO, the CFO, or strong voices that are down on the industrial floor within the
Right.
company. How do leaders lend themselves more to the PR efforts, and how freaking time consuming is that?
Well, they are busy. So I
Yeah.
think that's why they do need somebody who can sit down and just, I don't want to say pick their brains, but interview them, which I do with especially one of my clients. Their CEO sits down with me quarterly, and we for like an hour, and we just talk, and we record it. I take notes, and then we can come back with some I come back with some ghost written content, and of course he reviews it, and you learn their voice over time, and it's another way for them to get their thoughts out there, because these folks have been around a while. They are thought leaders in their space. It's not like they've only been there a year and have nothing to share that's
Yeah.
really valuable. It's just that they're too busy to sit down and write, or they just, I don't know. It's helpful to have somebody to do that. So if you don't have anyone like that in house, you can always bring in, somebody from outside to kind of help you with that. And it can be factored into what you're doing in so many different ways. So you'll really get a lot of mileage out of it.
Awesome. Always appreciate your time, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Doug.